I went to look after my father-in-law and realized that his tool was hard, so I couldn't resist. Good afternoon to all my dear followers of the Secrets of Infidels channel. My name is Mia. I'm 24, with long blonde hair and green eyes. My life has taken a real turn recently, something I could never have predicted. It all started unexpectedly, when I started looking after my father-in-law, Oliver. I never imagined that living together would bring so many changes, but life always surprises us at the most unpredictable moments. This journey began a few years ago when I married Austin, my boyfriend since school. Our relationship was always marked by a lot of love and complicity, but, as happens in so many marriages, routine set in. Austin, always dedicated to his work, started traveling more often, and I found myself at home alone, with no one to share my time with. As the days went by, loneliness became a constant presence, and with it came the desire for something more, a need for emotions that seemed to have disappeared from my life. Oliver, my father-in-law, has always been a strong and striking presence, an elegant, charming man with a physique that didn't reveal his advanced age. Despite his age, he displayed an aura of self-confidence and seriousness that drew attention wherever he went. At family parties or social events, it was common to hear comments about what an attractive man he still was, and internally I always agreed. Until then, I had never seen Oliver in any other way than as my husband's father. He was someone to be admired, but nothing more. At least until that moment. Everything began to change when Oliver had a serious motorcycle accident. He was on his way home from work when he was hit by a car on a dangerous bend. Although he survived, the accident left him temporarily immobilized and in need of constant care. Austin, about to embark on another of his business trips, asked me from the bottom of his heart to look after his father during his absence. I accepted, of course. It was the least I could do for the man who had always treated my husband with such affection and respect. Little did I know that this decision would change the course of my life completely. The first night I was responsible for looking after Oliver, I felt a mixture of nervousness and anxiety. There I was, by his bedside, ready to help him with anything he needed, without imagining how this new routine would transform my life. I carefully prepared dinner and patiently helped him eat, as he still struggled to make some movements on his own. Even in his weakened state, Oliver kept his gaze steady and penetrating. From time to time, I noticed that he was watching me with an intensity I had never noticed before. I had always known him to be a man attentive to detail, but now there was something different about the way he looked. I tried to ignore it, thinking that perhaps it was just the discomfort of the situation he was in, and I continued with my tasks, striving to remain professional. As the days went by, I adapted to the routine of caring for Oliver. I cleaned his room, prepared his meals, helped him with light exercises to help him recover, and little by little, we began to talk more. Oliver had always been a reserved man with few words, but the vulnerability caused by the situation made him more open, and our conversations began to flow naturally. He always made a point of complimenting me, commenting on how lucky Austin was to have such a dedicated and caring woman by his side. His compliments seemed sincere, but over time I noticed something else in his words. There was a subtle tension in the air, something that went beyond the simple bond between father-in-law and daughter-in-law. That night, while I was helping Oliver get into bed, as I did every night, something unexpected happened. While I was arranging the pillows, I noticed his gaze fixed on me, an intensity that made me shudder. It was a strange sensation, a mixture of nervousness and curiosity that I had never felt before. Oliver was lying down, but his eyes didn't stray, watching me in a way that seemed almost palpable. I hurried out of the room, using tiredness as an excuse. But the truth was that my heart was racing, and I needed a moment to process what was happening inside me. The following night, the tension between us seemed to have intensified even more. There was something in the air, something I couldn't ignore. As I helped him clean up, our gazes met again, and this time, I simply couldn't look away. My heart raced and my face felt hot. He was looking at me in a way he had never done before, as if he could see all my thoughts, all the desires I was trying to hide. The line between care and desire was becoming increasingly blurred, and I didn't know how to deal with the situation. On the one hand, I felt guilt, the feeling that I was betraying Austin's trust, but on the other, an uncontrollable excitement was growing inside me with every moment I was with Oliver. The situation came to a head one rainy evening. I was finishing organizing the kitchen when I heard Oliver calling me from the bedroom, needing help getting into bed. I went there, and as I entered, something inside me already sensed that tonight would be different. As I approached the bed, I felt the tension in the air, the same tension that had been growing between us over the last few days. Oliver looked at me with an intensity that made my whole body shiver. As I reached up to adjust the blanket, I felt his hands gently touch my waist. For a brief moment, my heart seemed to stop. I was paralyzed, not knowing how to react. My reason was telling me to move away, but the throbbing desire inside me spoke louder. He gently pulled me closer and, before I could make any decisions, his lips met mine. Before continuing with this infidelity story, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel. It was an intense kiss, full of desire. And although I wanted to resist, I couldn't. I closed my eyes and gave in. I closed my eyes and gave myself completely to that moment. The heat of the kiss ran through every inch of my body, as if all the control I believed I had over myself had dissipated. Guilt was there, like a shadow lurking in my thoughts, but the pleasure and adrenaline that invaded me at that moment were undeniable and irresistible. Oliver, though weakened, held me tightly, while I felt the world around us fade away. We pulled apart briefly, and I looked at him, trying to understand the intensity of what had just happened. Oliver was as confused as I was, but there was no sign of regret in his eyes. We knew we had crossed a dangerously fine line, and the worst thing was that instead of feeling guilty, the thrill of the risk and the transgression made it all the more exciting. What was supposed to be just a fleeting moment turned into something much deeper, leaving a taste of, "I want more," in the air. The next day, Austin returned home. I was full of nerves, with my heart racing and the fear that he might realize what had happened while he was away. However, to my surprise, he acted as if nothing had changed. He greeted me with a soft kiss and a loving hug, carrying on with his usual routine, as if everything was perfectly normal. He didn't suspect a thing. This momentary relief gave me the courage I needed to move on. I knew I had crossed a line and done something I shouldn't have, but at the same time, the adrenaline and emotion I had experienced with Oliver left a taste of wanting more on my lips. Thus, my life split into two distinct worlds. One where everything was safe and known, and another where desire and adventure intertwined in every thought. During the day, I became the perfect wife for Austin. I looked after the house, kept the routine in order, and made a point of showing all the love and dedication I'd always had for him. However, during visits to his parents' house, especially when we were alone, the atmosphere between Oliver and me changed completely. Our exchanged glances said more than any words could express, and the little discreet touches during family conversations made my body tremble with desire. I could no longer ignore my feelings for him, and it was clear that Oliver shared them too. The growing tension between us was palpable, an electricity in the air that made every interaction a mixture of anxiety and excitement. With each visit, the tension between us intensified. There was always that moment when our gazes met, and it was impossible not to feel the electricity running through the room. We knew we were playing with fire, but the danger of being found out only made it all the more exciting. The fact that I was living a lie, having a secret relationship with my father-in-law while still married to Austin, gave me a rush of adrenaline that I couldn't shake. As time went by, my relationship with Oliver grew stronger. We didn't need words to know what each other was thinking. Just one look, one touch, and everything was clear. We were connected in a way that I had never experienced before. And even though I knew it could destroy my life, I couldn't stop. The feeling of living this double life, of keeping this secret while remaining married, consumed me completely. I knew I was playing with fire, but at the same time, the heat of the game was addictive. Continuing this lie became part of my routine, and as much as I knew it could end badly, I wasn't ready to extinguish the flame. The days following my first kiss with Oliver were a real emotional roller coaster. I was torn between my guilt at cheating on Austin and the increasingly intense desire I felt for Oliver. His presence in my life took up a space that I hadn't even known existed before. He was no longer just my father-in-law. Now he had become someone with whom I shared deep secrets, and the bond we created went far beyond a simple attraction. And if you're enjoying this tale of infidelity, don't forget to comment that you're enjoying it. Oliver, for his part, was also confused. He knew what we were doing was wrong, but the connection between us was undeniable. It wasn't just about sex or desire. There was something more. A silent understanding. A complicity that grew every day. He began to treat me with an unexpected tenderness, almost as if he wanted to protect me from everything, including the guilt I felt. It was as if, little by little, he was taking on the role of caregiver in my life, a big daddy, as I began to call him in my thoughts. While Austin continued with his travels and work, Oliver and I saw each other more and more. We used his trips to the doctor as an excuse to spend more time together. Little by little, I began to feel comfortable in his company, in a way I had never felt before. He became the man who was there for me at all times, filling the void that Austin had unknowingly left. Oliver listened to me, understood me, and above all, made me feel wanted in a way that I hadn't felt for a long time. I remember one afternoon in particular. We were in the living room of my in-laws' house, and Oliver asked me to sit next to him on the sofa. It was a warm day, and the window was open, letting in a light breeze that swayed the curtains. I was nervous, as I always was around him, but at the same time I felt strangely safe. Sitting next to Oliver was comforting, as if he could protect me from anything that might happen. "You look beautiful today, Julia," he said, with that smile that always baffled me. "Thank you," I replied with a shy smile. "You look good too." Oliver laughed lightly, and then placed his hand on mine. A simple gesture, but loaded with meaning. "I like spending time with you. It's been different, in a good way." I knew what he meant. The relationship we were building was much deeper than just physical attraction. He was becoming a constant and comforting presence in my life, almost like a mentor or a guide, as well as a lover. And I was becoming attached to him in a way that I didn't know whether it was healthy or not. "I like it too, Oliver," I confessed, looking down at our intertwined hands. "I like it a lot." It was at that moment that I realized how deep our bond had become. It wasn't just about the hidden meetings or the secret we shared. Oliver was becoming someone essential to me, someone I didn't want to lose. He was more than a father-in-law, more than a man I was having an affair with. He was, in a way, a father figure. Someone who filled an emotional void that I didn't even know I had. The encounters between us became more frequent and increasingly intense. Oliver treated me with an affection that I wasn't used to receiving, and this care made my affection for him grow. As time went by, we began to have intimate relations almost every day. He wasn't just a secret lover, but a big daddy, someone who looked after me in a protective way, while I continued to lead my double life. I knew I was risking everything, but the truth was that I could no longer imagine my life without him. Austin continued to travel for work, without suspecting a thing. I kept up the facade of perfect wife while, behind the curtains, I built a parallel life with Oliver. The fear of being discovered put me on constant alert, but at the same time, this danger only made everything more exciting. It was as if the risk of losing everything made me want to live every moment with Oliver even more intensely. We started meeting up at unusual times. Sometimes he would call me to come over to his house early in the morning, before Austin left for work, saying he needed help with something. Other times, he'd make up appointments in the city just so we could spend some time together. The feeling of leading this double life made me euphoric, as if I were constantly on the verge of something dangerous, but at the same time irresistible. One day, Oliver suggested that I spend more time at his house. He said he was worried about his recovery and that he might need care at any moment. Deep down, I knew he just wanted more opportunities for us to be together, but I accepted without hesitation. From that moment on, I started spending more and more time at my in-laws' house, claiming to Austin that I was helping his father recover. The meetings at Oliver's house became more and more frequent and intense. He treated me with an affection and devotion that I had never felt before. It wasn't just a physical thing between us, but an emotional connection that grew stronger every day. Oliver took on this big daddy role naturally, and I felt more and more comfortable and protected in his presence. Our meetings, once hurried and furtive, were now longer and more relaxed. We spent hours talking, laughing, and sharing stories. Oliver would tell me about his youth, about how he had always been an adventurous man full of life. He spoke with a nostalgia that made me feel like I was getting to know a side of him that nobody else knew. I felt special, privileged to share these moments with him. Over time, I grew even more attached to Oliver. He gave me what Austin, even without meaning to, couldn't: attention, affection, and the feeling of being cared for. Gradually, I began to spend nights at his house, claiming to Austin that I was only there to look after his father. But the truth was much more complex than that. I was living a double life, and as much as I knew it was wrong, I couldn't stop. Every time I lay down next to Oliver, I felt a mixture of security and excitement. He hugged me lovingly, as if I were someone very important to him, and that warmed me up inside. I knew that, in the eyes of the world, what we were doing was unacceptable. But those nights it all seemed to make sense. I was happy next to him, and he seemed to feel complete next to me. The relationship with Oliver strengthened to the point where he started talking about us in a more serious way. "I don't know what's going to happen from now on, Julia," he told me one night as we lay together. "But I want you to know that I'm here for you. No matter what happens, I'll protect you." Those words touched me deeply. Oliver wasn't just a lover, he was becoming someone indispensable in my life. I knew I was getting more and more involved, but the truth was that I didn't want to stop. The feeling of being with him was too intense to ignore. The life I was leading was a tightrope walk, a thin line between reason and desire, between right and wrong. I, who had always seen myself as a controlled person, found myself caught up in something I could never have imagined. On one side was Austin, my husband, the man who had been my safe haven for so long, the one with whom I had built a life, a story. He had always been loving, devoted, but lately something had changed. I don't know if it was time or routine, but our relationship was getting colder every day. Conversations were shorter, touch was more distant, and intimacy was almost non-existent. The truth is that, emotionally, he no longer filled me like he used to, and this absence, this lack of connection, began to open up a space inside me that I didn't know existed. It was into this space that Oliver, my father-in-law, entered. He was everything I hadn't expected, but exactly what I needed. Oliver was always around, always attentive, a real big daddy. But over time, this attention began to take on a new meaning, to become something more. At first, it was just longer glances, more subtle gestures, closer conversation. I ignored it, pretended it was all in my head, a mere fantasy. But the truth was there, unfolding before my eyes, and by the time I realized it, I was too involved to turn back. The encounters with Oliver were full of adrenaline, full of an intensity I didn't know I could still feel. I felt alive, desired in a way I hadn't been for a long time. Every time we met, it was as if the world outside stopped. When we were together, there was no more right or wrong, husband or father-in-law, just the moment, the chemistry that consumed us and took us to a place where anything was possible. And I wanted more of that place. I wanted to lose myself in it, even though I knew that every step I took me deeper into this double life. But the truth is that living like this, torn between two worlds, had its price. On the one hand, I saw myself as the faithful wife, the woman who kept her house in order, who supported her husband in good times and bad. I dressed for Austin, cooked for him, waited for him to come home late from work, all as if nothing had changed. I smiled, but inside I was confused, lost. How could I go on living this lie? On the other hand, with Oliver, I felt like a different person. A version of me that knew no limits, that gave in to the moment without thinking about the consequences. Oliver treated me like a desirable woman, someone who still had a lot to offer, and that moved me. It was addictive. Every encounter, every touch, every glance exchanged in the corridors of Austin's house made me want more. The risk, the secret, the thrill of living something forbidden were almost irresistible. And Oliver, with his firm and confident manner, made me feel safe in this parallel world we had built together. I knew that at some point, this bubble would burst. It was impossible to maintain this lie for long without loose ends starting to appear. Austin was no fool, and although I tried to act naturally, there were moments when I noticed his suspicious gaze, as if he was beginning to realize that something was out of place. The fear of being found out consumed me, but at the same time, the desire for Oliver pushed me to keep going. It was an addictive cycle, and I was trapped in it. Sometimes I wondered if Oliver felt the same weight as me. He seemed so at ease with the whole situation, so sure of what he was doing. Perhaps for him, it was just a game, a passing adventure. But for me, it was more than that. I was torn between the man who swore to love and protect me, and the man who made me feel alive, wanted and complete in a way I didn't know I needed. The choice was there, in front of me, growing by the day, but I wasn't ready to make it. I clung to the idea that somehow I could continue living this double life, enjoying the best of both worlds. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be like that forever. Fate would sooner or later demand a decision, and I would have to choose between Austin's security and the overwhelming passion I felt for Oliver. Until then, I would continue in this dangerous game, enjoying every moment with my big daddy, knowing that at any moment, everything could fall apart. That was the story, my loves. I really hope you all enjoyed it and got involved in every detail. If you liked it, don't forget to comment below. I love to know what you think, and it's a way for us to stay connected. Oh, and don't forget to leave a like. See? It helps me a lot to keep bringing you new content full of emotion and intensity. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, what are you waiting for? Click on the subscribe button and activate the bell so you don't miss out on any hot news to come. After all, every story here is designed to ignite that flame of desire and make your day even hotter.